Great, thank you very much. All right. Well, listen, slightly unusual title tonight. I know I've given lots of sort of factual talks to many of you over the years, and I've decided to do something slightly different tonight, partly initiated because of Jessie's program, and slightly more challenging perhaps, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback and interaction at the end of it, because I'm excited about some of the things that we might be able to do. So I've entitled this Things I Wish I Had People Had Told Me, and this is in response to a lot of people that I've looked after over many years who will sometimes say to me, gosh, you know, I wish I had known that back then. And we'll go from there. When I was thinking about this talk, I had recently been to one of the talks by David Mates, and as you know, because of the hospital needing to be rebuilt and really the health services in Canterbury being very damaged, there is a great deal of interest in looking at where we want to take healthcare and how we will provide healthcare and what will happen to healthcare services in Canterbury in 2020. And so that's been a challenge for all of us to sit back and to look forward to how might we do things differently, which is nice to have a period of reflection, something that we don't often get time to do. And the thing that has come out at a lot of those meetings, to my mind, is that there is going to be a much bigger emphasis on self-management and self-reliance. And I think this is a good thing, that too often healthcare has been administered, if you like, by the people on the other side of the desk, and perhaps hasn't always addressed the needs as patients and people who get the care perceive it to be. The problem is that when you are trying to make decisions, each of you, you need to make good decisions, you need information. And you need reliable and appropriate information. And I think that that is one of the bigger challenges that we need to address to try and help people make decisions for themselves, to allow them to self-manage. And I think this is the sort of thing where Jessie's program comes in. So tonight I'm going to talk about what I think is often the elephants in the room. I'm going to talk about socio-economic factors in MS and disability. And I think it's a big thing that people don't talk about. How many of you have been to the doctor, and when you're first diagnosed, obviously there's a period of adjustment and things, but then there's questions that you have about where am I going to be in 10 years? Where am I going to be in 20 years? How's this going to affect me? What do I do with my work? And you know, we never talk about it, do we? It's sort of under the mat a little bit. So I'm going to give you some hard facts tonight, and I'm going to challenge you to try and change some of these things. I think it's widely acknowledged that MS has a large impact on people's socio-economic status. And the single thing that determines your socio-economic status is your employment. So that is the biggest factor in all of our socio-economic wellness, if you like. Now, people with MS are incredibly talented. They are skilled, and the large majority, over 90%, work. And so this is a highly skilled group. And yet, in some studies, over 80% of people are no longer working. And I think that's a terrible travesty. So this creates a huge impact and potential sort of loss of earnings of up to 40% of people's lifetime savings. So what about in New Zealand? Well, in 2001 and 2005 there were two studies done, one of which was done actually by Ivan Donaldson in the Canterbury West Coast and Manawatu, that found that 50% of people were not in paid employment. Well, it's high, particularly when you think what a highly skilled group people are. The prevalence study in 2006, we might have thought that things were improving, but no. Of the working age people between 25 and 64 in that study, over half were not working, and that was compared with 22% of the general New Zealand population on census day. And the majority, and this is where Jessie's program comes in, attributed this to fatigue, lack of mobility, or concentration difficulties. Now, if you look at this prevalence map, this is the number of people in New Zealand on Census Day 2006 with MS. You can see that in terms of numbers, the greatest numbers are people during their working years there, and particularly through what for many of us is our most productive years. This is staggering. The median income for a person, personal income for everybody on Census Day with MS is $20,000. Now, New Zealand median income ain't that much better, I have to say, and 30% of people were receiving an invalid's benefit, and for anybody who receives that, you know that that is very hard to live on. So the major drivers in terms of the things that we looked at for loss of work was age, increasing age, being female, progressive forms of disease and higher disability, as you might expect. But the staggering thing was that 55% of the patients in the study, that's nearly 3,000 patients, had stopped work within the first 5 years of their diagnosis. And when I talk about disability, that means that many people didn't have physical disability. Now, they may have had fatigue and cognitive difficulties and all sorts of, and there's lots of reasons why people give up work, but that's quite sobering. So I think we need to have a discussion, and I think we need to gather a lot more information about the factors and the barriers to employment in New Zealand. And so you'll notice that my opening slide had the red, and this is the thing I leave. Leaving the workforce may have significant long-term socio-economic impacts. So that's the first thing I'm going to say I wish somebody had told me. So I'm going to talk about the other elephant in the room now, and that is disability. Just to remind people a little bit about the overall general nature of multiple sclerosis, you have this period of time, and for the majority of people, 85%, they start the disease with relapses. And there is this period of time of relapsing, remitting, and that at some period, and this is what we're going to talk about here, some period, the disease doesn't relapse completely or remit completely, and that people begin to slowly accrue disability. The vast majority of people in New Zealand have relapsing, remitting forms of the condition. And so I think that's important to remember. There are a group with primary progressive, so progressive from onset, and a smaller group, but a significant group, with secondary progressive MS. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. So let's just remind ourselves of the disability scores that we use. And this is the one that when you see me in the clinic and I do those neurological assessments, and then I make you walk, and or Jane makes you walk down the road, this is what we're doing. And it is allowed some degree of objectivity in terms of being able to compare where you were last year to where you are this year. And essentially, between 0 and 5, people are able to walk without any external assistance. And you can see that there's varying degrees of difficulty. 3, which is a sort of a key point that we use, people may have some non-ambulatory disability, something that bothers you or bugs you, but it's not extremely disabling. 5, again, still walking, but just can't quite do the distances or quite as much as you would normally do. And then between 6 and 7, you need some kind of support for walking. and obviously people with more severe disability with the higher scores. So essentially, and in summary of that, 3 and below, mild disability, those between 3 and 5.5, still able to walk independently, moderate disability, still able to walk with aids, and then more severe disability. So just let's have a look at this. These are the numbers, again, from 2006 in New Zealand, and you can see that, again, the numbers of people less than 3 are quite high, nearly 800 people. Those who are between 3 and 5.5, so still able to get around without any assistance, and then those who get around with assistance, and there's a number of you here today. And then a smaller group, a significant group, but a smaller group with more severe disability. So the point I want to make is that the majority of your lifespan will be spent in this area here. And this is just a slightly different way of looking at it. 40% of people, mild, moderate, and a third with more severe disability. And to remember that more severe disability doesn't necessarily mean that people still aren't able to contribute in a large way. So how long does it take? Now, the average age of onset of MS is changing. We used to say that it was 29, and we're Shredder. In the prevalence study it was 31. So the average age of onset of disease now is 31. So remember that when you see these, that the median time, and this is the London, Ontario cohort, which was 2,000 patients, and this is all comers. So this is the best and the worst of everybody, including those with very severe disability and those who tend to be progressive from the start. And you can see that the median time to have a little bit of something that bothers you is 4 years. But the median time to be 6, which is using one cane, 15 years. And the median time to severe disability, 40 years. Now, if you don't get MS till you're 47, and we've certainly been diagnosing people in their 40s, you're going to be here in your 80s. The other thing which I think is really important to remember, this is the London, Ontario data that I was telling you about, which was this cohort where a lot of this was worked out, and this is the number of people in that cohort at the different ages that become increasingly disabled. But in the modern era, and with drug treatments, what we're seeing is a shift in this pattern. So we are seeing, you can see here, that nearly 60% of people at 15 years were beginning to get some progression of their disease. Whereas in the modern era, that seems to be improving. Now, some of that will be drugs, some of it will be better care, and this is the sort of thing that we're really interested in looking at in New Zealand, to try and give a perspective of people, to provide people with information so they can make realistic decisions about their future. Because I think that one of the things that it's important to realise again is that where people expect that with progressive disease, and I know everybody talks about, gosh, have I got progression? They often ask me, because they see it as a sort of linear decline. But in fact, it doesn't work like that either. You can see here, and this is a bit of a represent, that this scale is not very linear at all. And people spend long periods. So even though people might have secondary progressive MS, i.e. not getting any relapses and getting worse, they spend long periods of time at certain places. So whilst that data I showed you showed the onset of progressive disease, a person may then spend 10 years using a cane or 2 canes. And so the take-home point I wanted to make from this part of the talk was that disability is not inevitable, and it's also not linear. And I think it's so important for people to know this when they are planning their future and thinking about giving up work or thinking about making changes in their lives. And for most, significant disability will occur beyond your working years. So those are the challenges that I think that we need to learn and try and provide people with better information, and also to learn from those of you in the audience what you perceive as the barriers that we can change, and what are the things that people think that they've done or can change. And I look around the room and I see many of examples of people here who I have so much admiration for and who have managed to make lots of changes that have allowed them to continue to work and obviously continue to be very active members of their communities. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks Debbie. I think there are some really interesting results, part of those obviously from your own research, and the most sort of striking statistic, as you point out to me, is that 55% of people stop working the first 4 years, yet the disability that those people have on the scales that you measure is relatively mild. And I guess the real question is, well, why do people, what forces people to stop work, why are they stopping work? And it would be nice to have some of those answers, and maybe fatigue is one of those things. We have got time. Debbie's kept absolutely perfectly to time, and we're on schedule, so we've got time for questions or statements, if anyone's got anything they'd like to ask or contribute. Debbie, you can ask questions later on as well after Jessie's talk as well. Has anyone got any questions or statements they want to make? People who have been working or not working, and Hilda Mulligan, physiotherapist.
I've got a family member with multiple sclerosis who has given up work actually less than 3 years after diagnosis. And I was stunned at that because I didn't know why. But they put, she and her husband put it forward that it was a way to kind of save ability.
Yeah.
Can everybody hear that question? Perhaps Debbie would like to rephrase it.
Yeah, so Hilda, I think that's a really good point, and I think again this comes back to Jessie's program a little bit about confidence, about how much you can do. I find this quite a lot with GPs too, that there are quite a lot of people who are advised to give up work because that the stress of work or the onus of work may contribute. Now, I'm sure there are people, there are lots of reasons why people give up work, and I think that everybody has to ultimately make their own decision. But I think that's partly some of the misinformation that is given to people, and that potentially coming out of the workforce may have huge ramifications for that person for the next 20 years of their life, both socio-economically. I'm not saying that this would happen in your family, but if your friend or family member's marriage then broke up, then you have a female who doesn't have a strong source of support. And there is an enormous literature about, and certainly in our prevalence study, women fared much worse than men.
Hi, Debbie. Your graph showed the highs and lows of the first 4 years quite aggressively, but in that period, in my experience, when I got EMS, I didn't have a clue where I was going.
Yeah,
I had a big job, and I had to make a decision pretty quickly. Yeah. And I think if there was a program together that if someone could come and see you and talk about that and say, well, don't panic, let's just judge it. And I found that the most humorous 4 years of my life almost, those first ones.
And so Lou's just saying that he had to make a lot of decisions in those first 4 years of his diagnosis, and that he didn't have the information always that he needed. And I guess that's why I've sort of said the elephant in the room. I'm actually willing to come out and talk about those things. And many of you will have heard me talk about this already, or even say it to you. Don't change a thing initially. Don't rush into anything. Because I can tell you I've spoken with a lot of people who down the track have said, you know, I would have, if somebody had just told me, I would have done things differently. We saw this a lot with people deciding to have pregnancies. Women in tears in their 60s who were told that they shouldn't have families, who have deep regrets about that now. And I think that this is where the challenge for medical staff in the future is to be upfront with these things, to talk to people about what the future might hold, and also to create information and support through those years which are the most difficult until you come to terms with and begin to know your own disease. Great point. Shrita.
Does the current disease-modifying drugs, do they have any effect on fatigue at all?
Shrita's asking whether the medications improve fatigue or have an effect on fatigue. Generally speaking, the interferons, at least initially, probably cause a little bit more fatigue. And for some people, it's the reason why they stop the medication. The newer drugs are better from that point of view, and there's some literature for natalizumab, for example, that in fact that is one of the big things that people notice is that the fatigue is improved. So the more powerful drugs, despite their risks, often improve fatigue. Copaxone I found to be relatively modest, and there is some suggestion that it may slightly improve fatigue as well.
So first of all, thank you very much all for coming out tonight. And Debbie has referred a couple of times to Jessie's program, and what I think is so exciting about this program is it was my sort of annoying little idea in the beginning, but so many people who are here tonight have contributed to this, and it is something that is just so much bigger than I could ever have envisioned, much like myself at the moment, but that's all right. So what, I was planning to do it later, but I will introduce Dr. Hilda Mulligan to you, who is sitting on the very end there. And Hilda, stand up for a quick second. So I met Hilda when I was 20, and I was in my final year of physiotherapy, and Hilda was my supervisor at that stage. And then she reminded me that she launched me into my very first job after graduating. Then I disappeared off for 5 years, and when I came back, it was actually Hilda. I said, do I want to work with MS? And she went, wonderful, they've been looking for someone for a while. So I don't know if I got bullied into the job or if I bullied Jenny into taking me, but I'm very grateful that she did. So what I would like to do tonight is talk about a little bit about where this has all come from, because I think that's what's so exciting about how this program has evolved, and then tell you a wee bit about the program itself. So, first of all, why is this important? And I'd say over 50% of the people in the room can say exactly why this is such an important topic. But for those of you who don't know, experimenting with the mouse here. Sorry, is it just with... Brilliant. So 75 to 90% of people with MS will experience fatigue. Might not be very surprising to some of you in the room. And this is often described as the worst symptom, the thing that really stops them carrying on with their old life. So I'm presuming I'm going to see some nods coming from the audience here. Yeah. So fatigue is really difficult. Beautiful. So from what I understand, fatigue in MS is unique to MS. So pregnancy can be fatiguing, rheumatoid arthritis can be fatiguing. There are different things that can cause fatigue, but MS fatigue is its own devil. It's unpredictable and disproportionate. So I can understand when I get to the end of the day, if I'm tired, it makes sense. I've worked hard all day, I'm exhausted because it's the end of the day. Fatigue and MS can just come on like that for no reason. I mean, the number of people who have told me how they need to have a lie down after they've got up. Got up, got dressed, need to have a rest before I can even think about breakfast. It intensifies other symptoms. So if you have a leg that doesn't quite do its job, or vision that can be a wee bit dodgy, you put fatigue on top of that and that leg really doesn't do its job and that vision really does become quite dodgy. So fatigue will make all those symptoms of MS worse. It's unrelated, and I think we talked about this, to the severity of MS. So when I was meeting a lot of people before I started all this, they would walk on in and my first impression was, oh good, they look like they're coping well, and their fatigue was just overwhelming. So it doesn't relate to what the other parts of your body are doing, it's its own thing. And the last one there is it's invisible. So what I always have people saying is how hard it is for anyone else to understand. It's so hard to describe it. It's hard for the person with MS to understand it themselves. So for the other people in their lives, whether it's their partners, their families, or their employers, it's very, very difficult to explain. In saying that, somebody in the room has done a beautiful explanation. Sorry, I'm not in a very good angle here. It is not a healthy tired that is so satisfying following a hard day's work. It is a draining, sickening tired that engulfs you. It weighs you down, nauseates, as well as crushing your spirit. So there may be some people in the room that can relate to that statement there. Excuse me. So that's why it was so important to do something about it. And when I'll talk now a little bit about how it all began. And it began with me working as a physio, obviously with people with MS, and a lot of the role of a physio is exercise programs. As you'll know, you've probably all been bullied by one of us at some stage into doing a bit more exercise. And I had a particular week where it was all women, but 3 different women come in, and again, they walked in well, and there was me giving them my lecture about how important exercise was. And for all 3 of these women, there was just absolutely no way that they could exercise. Every last ounce of energy in their life was going into getting up, getting to work, looking after their families, cooking dinner, having a shower. Those things there were really, really important. And exercise was just well off track. And I think as a physio who was really genuinely wanted to help people, this was just, I felt useless. I felt really hopeless, and I thought they don't need me, they need some fatigue management. So I talked to Jenny, who very kindly said, yep, you can spend a wee bit of time, why don't you read up a little bit on this and see what you can find. So it all started off as an idea of wanting to do something different. And then, as I said, Jenny said go for it, which was very kind of her. So what I did was I went out and had a look at what was happening overseas, and there are some programs being run overseas, so I had a look at all of what was offered there. Nothing was offered in New Zealand as far as I could find. And although you can read things about what's offered overseas, it's 6 headings, you can't get your hands on the goodies. So I again approached Jenny, and she said, sure, go for it, design your own course and run it. So we did a trial run, and then I got a lot of feedback from the people with MS who had done that. We changed it, we did it again, and people were starting to say, this is actually helping, this is good. So we changed it, and we did it again. And then we changed it, and we did it again. And then I spoke to Hilda, and I said to Hilda, I'd love to make this, I've put so much work into this so far, wouldn't it be great to make it something that other people could experience and to do it properly? And Hilda said, yes, but you can't do this by yourself. You need some research help. And I said, woohoo, that's what I was hoping you'd say. I think she's regretted it ever since, because it's been about 2 years now, and this has been a lot of work. So we went back to Jenny and Malcolm and said, how about we put this together into a proper research project, and how about we make something really valid? And they went, sure, here's lots of money, and take all the time you like. So they supported it hugely from the beginning. It wasn't quite as simple as that. So what Hilda and I decided we really needed to do was to create something that had meaning. A lot of what was created by physios and OTs and health professionals for people with MS. So we decided we wanted something that was really valid, and we wanted it to be valid because it was based on some science, so it was based on what people were doing overseas. It had some proper backing to what we were doing, we wouldn't just make it up. but it was made for New Zealanders. So it was made, started in Christchurch, and we're going to expand it, and it was made with the help of people who had MS-related fatigue, so the people for whom it matters. So what we did next was ask some people who had been through some of my trial runs if they'd be willing to come back and help us, and some of them said yes, which was very kind. They may have regretted it as well as the work went on. And we got together, we had 5 meetings, and after every meeting everyone was given a job to do, and the group decided what those jobs were. So Hilda and I initiated this. We very cleverly roped in Louise, who you'll meet later, who is an occupational therapist. Managing fatigue is something that traditionally occupational therapists have been the experts in, not physios. So we managed to get her brain involved, which was fantastic, and she was a huge help. And we got together with these 6 people with MS and had a whole bunch of meetings and decided what we were going to produce and how we were going to do it. We started with the basis of what I'd already done, and then we improved it and improved it and improved it till it was unrecognisable from what it had started off as. So this is what we came up with. A 6-week course of 2 hours a week, and this is based on what's done overseas for self-management programs like this. We decided that we'd have a maximum of 6 people. So much of the value of the program was actually me standing up the front, keeping my mouth closed, and letting the other people in the room talk to each other. So we really decided that 6 people was about the right number to allow some real conversation and real support to happen. We decided it would be led by a health professional. So we had great sort of chats about this, but decided that so often when we were doing a talk, it went off tangent, and it was useful having someone who knew a lot about MS from a kind of a medical background to be able to fill in some of those blanks. And we decided that we'd make a really beautiful workbook to go with it, which we did thanks to Tammy, who I can't see, but we had this wonderfully patient graphic designer who let me make 8 million trillion changes, emails at 11 o'clock at night, reproducing more and more of this beautiful workbook. And then we had the very kind, wonderful Frank Visser, who came out and took photos just for love of everyone that was involved. And there he is over there. So some of you will have seen, I meant to bring one up with me when I didn't, but it's a beautiful book. It's about 80 pages, and it's, thank you. We wanted this to be taken seriously, so it is glossy, and it's gorgeous. The photos are lovely. Have you ever seen it, Frank? Have you actually? You can have a look later. So throughout the book, every week we look at different causes of fatigue and how to improve those causes. And then throughout the book, people with MS have given their stories and their examples of how they've put those particular principles into practice. So I know you can't see it properly from there, but you're welcome to have a wee look later. So it's filled with gorgeous pictures, not too much chat, a wee bit of chat. Some worksheets, so people are having to really think about things and record them in there. This becomes their personal journal. So it's just lovely. And we've had a couple of drafts of this, and it's just got better and better. And the excitement we've had at holding this in our hands. I took it to Wine Club with me. No one at Wine Club has MS, no one's a physio, but I took it out with me and made them touch it and look at it because I was so proud.
I might just pass that round.
Yes, yeah, people are welcome to look, yes. So the next question that we need to ask is, does this actually work? And the first answer is yes, it does. We think it does. So this says, I met others and was surprised at how much it helped just to talk to people who, like me, found fatigue a very difficult aspect of their MS. The best thing I got out of the course was learning to manage my own fatigue in a way that worked for me. Although my fatigue can be very frustrating and debilitating, it no longer controls me. So the feedback has very much been, yes, this is positive, which is exciting. So why does it work so well? I'll go over this part quickly because this is a bit of the boring background, but it works because it's based on self-management principles, and this is an internationally known concept, and this is what gives it validity as well. This is what makes the physios sit up and listen and the OTs sit up and listen, is that it's based on principles that we know work. So people have to reflect and then act. So it's not just coming along and listening to me for 2 hours, it's coming along, it's really doing a bit of soul searching, it's really about thinking about your current week, what you're doing and how you can make changes. It's based on really powerful principles of fatigue management. So this was where having Louise involved was just so useful. So those of you who've been on the course will remember the 4 Ps, which is planning, prioritising, pacing and preserving energy. So we look over the 6 weeks at different ways of bringing that into every activity that people are doing. But I've put up there on capital letters, it's the group. So that I think has always come back. People have said the most powerful thing is sitting down in a room with 4 or 5 other people with MS who are living this, who understand it and who can share ideas. So that's been huge. And again, some more words that we use in research is modelling and mastery. So people come along and they see other people. If there's no one in that particular group they can really relate to, they've got the book. We know that this is more of a woman's disease than a man's, so if there's a man in the course and he's the only one, at least when he opens the book, he can see a couple of blokes in there. And mastery is the achieving of goals. So coming along week 1, and by week 2 you've achieved and you've realised that this fatigue that used to control and rule your life can actually be beaten and managed. Managed is really important there. I know some of you who haven't done the course are dying to know what it's actually about. So these are the sorts of things we cover. I won't go into these in depth because the value, as I said, is actually coming on the course and doing it. But these are a few of the themes that we look at, is actually what causes MS and what causes MS fatigue, but what causes people's own MS fatigue, because it's different for everybody. There's different things going on in people's lives. Communication, trying to explain MS fatigue to other people. The importance of exercise, so I do still get to have my little exercise talk in there. Dealing with stress and low mood and anxiety, looking at the other symptoms that can be made worse by MS, that can make MS fatigue worse. Looking at diet, looking at heat. Many of you in the room will know that heat makes everything that much worse. Juggling working, juggling parenting, recognising what your own limits are, recognising when you're approaching them and actually need to do something. Looking at sleep, which is obviously a huge part of managing fatigue, is actually sleeping well. Looking at some of the tools that are out there that can help you, and I meant to take that out, how to use and abuse your health professionals. we train them up as to what they'll come and say to you when they see you, Debbie. I meant to take out the use and abuse. So a couple of quick pages. So this is the page, can I read it, about approaching your own limit with fatigue. So, recognising when fatigue is coming on, what does your body do to you, and then how can you actually de-escalate that? What can you do that recharges you? So getting people to really think about these sorts of things and changing their fatigue from that top one to the bottom one. So we're not eliminating it, we're not taking it away, but we're making it manageable. This is another example from the book of modelling. So gorgeous picture of Joss up there, and sharing some stories. That one's about heat, how people deal with heat, and then a couple of photos showing them dealing with heat, so it's not just words. And then this is a page about working with MS, someone's experience of working with that. Very photogenic, no need to hide. Okay, so where are we going with this? Despite the fact that it's been a good couple of years, we're still in what we call the development stage of the research. So we are still changing it. We've got this beautiful workbook, as we said, but what we're going to do next, not this weekend, but next, is we've got 5 people coming from different parts of the country, and Rachel from Christchurch, who are going to come and train in how to lead the group. So we've got 4 physios and 2 OTs, and they're coming from Southland, Nelson, Wellington, Palmerston North and Auckland. So a real mix. One of them's employed by DHB, some of them are employed by MS societies, and some are contractors. So what we're really looking at is, does this expand out to New Zealand? And if not, what can we change? So those people will come and train, they will go back to their parts of the country, and then they'll run the course there. And then we'll do study sort of around how they've found it and are there things we should be changing and doing differently. And we'll evaluate it. So this is where Hilda really comes in with doing this qualitative and quantitative research, which means asking people about their experiences, actually getting their stories about how they've found it, what was good, what could be changed, but also doing measures, so measuring their fatigue beforehand, measuring their fatigue afterwards. Because as you know, when you're doing research, you actually need to be able to prove these things in order to get people to give you money to do more research and keep running the course. So we're making this really valid and very professional. It's quite exciting. We'll change it as we need to. So if we find that our stories are far too Christchurch, we took the word earthquake out of the book altogether, but everyone in the book is from Christchurch. So if we need to, we'll add in some stories from people in other parts of New Zealand, and we'll look at whether our measures worked. We'll look at whether the 2 days training for the health professionals was actually enough or if they needed a wee bit more. So we really are still developing and evaluating this. We've been asked when we're going to do the internet version of it, so that will come at some stage when we get the first part right, but we're going to keep on going. We'll then be offering this throughout New Zealand under licence, so it will always belong to MS and Parkinson's in Canterbury. And the reason that's so important is we've made something so valuable and we've put so much work into it, and we don't want it to be changed by people on a whim. So we're really acknowledging the hard work that's gone into it from everyone. So it's under licence and it's all copyrighted. And then we'll just keep on evaluating and changing and evaluating and changing. But it won't be me, because I'll be off having my own fatigue experience for a wee while.
Questions? I'm sure there's some questions about the program. Some of you obviously have been on the program, some of you may wish to go on the program. If I could kick off, do you envisage that this is going to be a one-on-one physio with the patient, or is this going to be a group exercise for people? How's it going to work?
Yep. It will always be a group because of the... I mean, I know some stuff, but I don't live with MS and I don't have MS-related fatigue. So we're always recognising that huge value in the other people in the group. What's been quite interesting is we've had people come to the course who've had MS for 5 months, and we've had people who've had it for 18 years. And, you know, both groups of people seem to get huge amounts out of it, which is quite exciting. But that's the group. That's nothing to do with me standing up the front.
Any other questions? So, yeah, please.
I don't have MS as such, but can partners do the course with their partner that has MS so they can understand what they're going through, or is it more just for the person that's got MS?
Yeah, so the question for those who didn't hear it is that, is this just a person with MS thing, or can the partners attend these sessions?
And this is why I'm pleased that I don't make the rules, because we discussed this within the group, so all the people that had been through the program, and we made the decision that this is a self-management course. So we made the decision that it was for the person with MS to attend, but within that we have a lot of discussion around communication back with the family. So what we hope is that the person who comes along will actually be learning skills to communicate better with their family. And there was a lot of value again in just having those people who have that experience being together in the room without anyone else.
Yes, Jane. Cost, do you have to pay?
Yeah, ask Malcolm. We're working that out. There hasn't been to date, it's been a donation-based program, but Malcolm and Jenny, when they were generously handing all this money out for our time and the photocopying and the graphic designer, we have discussed this. And what we also, as a research group, we discussed it. And one of the key things that came through from the people who were involved in the research group was that they wanted this to be available to every single person in New Zealand with MS who it was appropriate for. So we're working that out still. But we do want to make it available, and that does mean that if people that can't afford to pay a cost can still come to it. So I'll get back to you on that one.
Yes.
Just one question. Is the course going to be available every year? How do I apply for it?
Yeah.
There's a table over there and you can pop your name, and yes, it will be. I'm not going to be running it for the next wee while, which you'll probably be very pleased about. But Rachel, the other physio at the MS Society, is going to come to the training, and she'll continue to run it in my absence. And there is the fatigue table over there with all the brochures. There's a place for you to put your name down on there. And I should point out we've only done it once so far because of the demand, but we do run it in evening as well. So when we have enough people who are working and can only make it to an evening course, then we'll run an evening course as well.
Yeah.
My wife just said, if you're not sure whether you know whether you want to go to this or not, can you come along and see if it works for you?
Did anyone hear the question? Yes. So really, can you have a bit of a sneak preview, just in case you're not sure whether it's going to be for you or not? Or are you committed to the 6 weeks?
Because it's a small group and the group is so important, we do ask people to commit to the 6 weeks, because I think it's something, I mean, the people who have actually been on the course can probably speak to that better than I can, but there's been real value. In the last course we ran, somebody had to leave the course halfway through because their mother was sick in the UK, and it changed our group. We really missed her, and it was sad to change it. But if you're not sure if it's for you, if you have MS and you have fatigue, it is. But you're welcome to speak to some of those people that had certificates thrown at them as well. I'm sure they wouldn't mind talking to it.
So Jessie, if I can, I mean, some people might be quite shy and not really, especially perhaps the males, and not really want to sort of open up too much in a big group. Do you see the possibilities of those people fitting in a more individual way?
There's no cuddling in our group at all. So I think the group always evolves in its own way, and every group that we've done is different, and that's what's been quite exciting about leading it, is that it's different every time. So it is a very factually based course. So the things that we're talking about, the topics that we're covering, you get from me, you get the science behind things, you get the techniques, and I guess you get the benefit of my experience of having met hundreds of people with MS, but then you also get the expertise of the other people in the group. If you're a bloke, you're allowed to put down, when you're giving us your name, that you'll only go if there's one other bloke in the room. You might be waiting for a little bit. But yeah, it's not... I wish we were in our research meeting because I want to throw this. We always throw everything back to the floor. But yeah, it's not touchy-feely. It's a factual-based course, and I think it's just wonderful for anyone. I don't know if you want to speak. If you're a bloke in the room and you're feeling shy, you can speak to Lou, because Lou's a bloke.
Thank you. Is the course on various different times during the day?
It can be, to be honest. So far we've run it at 10 o'clock in the morning till 12, looking at what fatigue patterns seem to be. That seems to be the better part of the day. But then when we did the evening one, I might have to have something to remind me, did we do it at 7? It was 7 o'clock, yeah. So we do work it for demand. We need there to be 4 to 6 people to come, but if 4 to 6 people say we can only come at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then we'll run a course at that time. Yeah.
And will it be the physio plus the occupational therapist? Is that what you envisage in the other centres as well, or is this just a one person?
Yep. So when we had the physio and the OT together, that was for the research. So when we run the group, because it is a small group, you don't actually want 2 bossy people involved. So you have one facilitator who's the same facilitator for those 6 weeks, because you do build relationships. But it can be the health professional that runs it. We've put in that they need to be a registered health professional, but whether it's a physio or an OT or a nurse, I don't think makes a difference. It's about having a person that can be quiet when they need to be quiet. It's really important. We can be awfully bossy bunch, sometimes health professionals. So it's more about the facilitation skills of the person leading it as opposed to what their profession is.
Any other burning questions? Yes.
From a community education perspective, have you given any thought to, say, a newspaper article and possibly a documentary about the research and what's coming?
So the question relates to what about publicising this maybe in newspapers or documentary film?
Yes. So in terms of, and that's a really important question, because I think so much of what we do in health, there's brilliant ideas all the time and they fizzle. And this has been really an exciting project for me, because obviously doing PR type things is nothing that I have any experience in. So doing it through the society, and we've got clever Lindsay over in the corner, who has been doing media releases around this, and making it, this is part of why we made it so pretty. You know, we wanted to make something that looks really good. We're trying to really have that combination of what's important in health, but that often doesn't get that publicity, and bringing the publicity in as well, which is why we're doing things like what we're doing tonight. I should have said at the beginning that in the last 2 months I've presented something similar at 2 different physio conferences around New Zealand, and it's had it won a prize. That was our big moment of pride in Dunedin. So we're really trying to push the publicity side of it, because something like this does need, no matter how valuable it is, it does need good press as well to attract people. So yes, and if you've got any ideas, I'm sure Lindsay, or contacts, I'm sure Lindsay will be pleased to hear them.
I heard yesterday on the radio an ad for fatigue and MS. Is that related, or is that just coincidental?
No, that's related. So that's our other guru over there, Amanda, who, I'm going to get your role wrong, who is the representative from MS New Zealand, and has been doing media releases as well. Yeah.
Well, I was just driving and I was like, wow.
I know we've got a fantastic team doing lots of hard work on this.
Jessie, what might you want a prize for?
Oh yes, thank you. So the prize in Dunedin was for the presentation with the greatest clinical relevance. So it was really exciting. There was 32 people who were open for that prize, who were doing sort of local research. So, and it was $500, which isn't bad. That's the sandwiches covered tonight. So I think what's so important about that is there was talks then about, dealing with low back pain in New Zealand, which is a huge big problem. Low back pain's a terrible thing. There was 32 other presentations, but the fact that I think we turned this into something real and actually relevant, that the people with MS this year, today, can come along and do this really relevant course for them.